Good morning, everybody. You're watching SmallCapSteve Live. I am SmallCapSteve. Thrilled you could all join us this morning. We've got a big guest, David Gower from Emerita Resources, a name that's gotten very popular on social media. The stock is just ripping this morning, so that's always exciting to have a guest on a day where the stock is doing well. Not much going on in the markets this morning, except for the fact that lumber is about $1,500. That is pretty wild. We're starting to see a little bit of a lift in precious metals. On top of that, Warren Buffett had his annual shareholder meeting there with the fine folks at Berkshire. Took some shots at Bitcoin. So we'll maybe get into that later on the show if we have time, and some of the Canadian venture news. So buckle up. Let's get started. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's an exciting day to have you on because, as we were talking about earlier, your stock's having a really good day. Last I checked, it was up like 30% or something like that, and it appears as though and Jay will be the first one to sort of poke fun at me that I'm not a big technical analysis guy, but when you see a chart that hasn't kind of hit that high in a long time and now it's hitting it, you've got some big catalysts in front of you or potential catalysts. It feels like the momentum might be starting here for the next leg up. So let's actually start right at the beginning for our audience. What's the story behind Emerita, and what can you tell us?
Okay, well, Emerita is, I mean, the assets are actually projects that we have been attempting to acquire for 6-7 years, actually, and this one in particular that we're just starting the drill program on, the Iberian Belt West project, which is in the Iberian Pyrite Belt in southern Spain. We went through a 6-year process of title dispute, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court of Spain. Trafigura was the other company that was trying to acquire it. But ultimately, the Supreme Court of Spain did rule in our favor late last year, and now we have a premier asset that is of interest to major companies. It's got 3 deposits on it. We've been through the permitting process and all of the other back work that needs to be done, and the drill is just starting. So in 3 to 4 weeks from now, say probably closer to 4, given COVID and the volumes at Assay Labs, we should be starting to deliver some really high grade drill results, hopefully. In the interim, we have been doing mapping on our targets and sampling at surface. So we should have a news release in the coming days, just based on the work that we've been able to do at surface while we're waiting for the final drill permit.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I think the market is probably excited about the fact that the drill is starting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this property, you guys were effectively, or I shouldn't say effectively, but you have a favorable judgment towards taking over the IBW, the Iberian Belt West property or project, which consists of 3 projects, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that was previously owned by Rio Tinto. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a historical property. The project was put out for public tender about 7 years ago now, and that was the awarding of the public tender was really the basis for the property dispute, and ultimately we were declared the winner of that process. Now, historically, this is actually very exciting in that it's the first time that all 3 deposits on that property have actually been held within one license. So it's a consolidated property position. Rio Tinto drilled the Romanera deposit in the 80s. It's about 34 million tons of kind of open pit grade, but we're focused on what's 11 million tons, more or less, that they calculated of higher grade material. We would really target all of these projects as an underground operation with a ramp access, as opposed to a large open pit with big waste piles, and it just reduces the environmental footprint, reduces the capital, and certainly makes the permitting much easier, I think. And you produce as much metal from a smaller amount of rock, essentially. Interestingly, the Romanera deposit, it was drilled initially by Asturiana de Zinc in the 60s, and they did not even look at the precious metal content back then. They didn't even assay for gold, for example. When we go through Rio Tinto's data subsequently, we're actually finding areas with, plus 10 meter intercepts of 2 grams and numerous zones, 2 to 4 meters of kind of 2 grams. And that wasn't even factored into their thinking back then. So we can see that there will be a very good precious metal, gold and silver credit attached to the copper, lead, zinc concentrates from this deposit. The Infanta deposit, which is on the other side of the property is about 18 kilometers long. It's about 8 kilometers across to Infanta. That's a very high grade deposit. It was drilled by Phelps Dodge in the 1980s. And at that time, Phelps Dodge had a very small postage stamp property to work with, and they only drilled it down to about 110 meters depth, and they had about 450 meters of strike extent that they could test. And then it ran off the property. So we have about 49 holes in Infanta, very high grade. We see values of kind of 2 to 4% copper, 10 to 20% zinc, 8 to 15% lead with 150 to 300 grams per ton silver. It's a very high grade mineralization and very completely open. So our first drill program will actually, the one we're starting right now, is on Infanta. That's ready to go, and we would expect to deliver grades on that level. 2 to 4% copper with 10 to 20% zinc and a very high silver. The objective of this drill program will be to extend it up to 1,200 meters along strike, which we've been able to basically map mineralization at surface for that strike length, and down to about 300 meters depth. So it's not just an infill program where we have 40 odd holes. We're also expanding the resource. And Romanera, I didn't mention it, but we also have about 50 drill holes there. So these are very well-known targets that we're starting with, which obviously was a major part of the attraction for this property.
So how big are the drill programs themselves?
The initial program that we're doing at Infanta is about 5,000 meters. We can expand it. That'll only cost us, because it's shallow, it's at surface, about $800,000. And our treasury right now is about $5.5 million. So we're in very good shape that way. And similarly, when we move across to Romanera, probably we're targeting around June for that, a similar scale project, again, because we have a lot of drilling already. So we have to redo a portion of it just for 43-101 purposes to get QA/QC data and obviously verify the historical work. But a lot of it will be to expand those resources. And both deposits are very much open. Romanera was drilled by Rio Tinto, Infanta by Phelps Dodge, so very strong, technically solid companies. Romanera was drilled only to 350 meters depth. It's still 20 meters thick at that depth and still going. It's open to the east. It may even be open to the west. It looks like it may be cut off by one drill hole out in that area, but it can get a lot bigger. And then in between the two, there's a third deposit, which we don't have data for, unfortunately, but we're familiar with it. It's called El Cura. It's another higher grade, low pyrite deposit, more similar to Infanta based on what we see at surface. And we have seen reference to it in historical work reports done by RTZ that we found, or Rio Tinto that we have found in the files, talking about at least 2 million tons there. But we will have to re-drill that one. We don't have the drill hole data for it.
So what can we expect for timelines here? Are you working on just an initial maiden resource estimate for the property as a whole and then continue to drill, or what's the plan in that regard?
Yeah, I think these programs, the target is to generate a 43-101 resource on the two Infanta and Romanera, and for us it would be to basically delineate the Alcura. We can easily do that well within the treasury that we have, and then it's really to take it through the economic assessment stage, which in the coming year would be or after that program would be the sampling for metallurgical purposes and PEA/pre-feasibility. With something like Romanera at 11 million tons and wide open of high grade, you with that number of drill holes, you could almost start pre-feasibility work right away. But if you look at the deck, it's quite important, I think, that we do re-drill some parts of that deposit. If you just go on to, let's see, that's okay. So on this slide, you can see the assays for La Infanta, which is the first one we're drilling. You can see the copper values between 1.5% and 4% copper. It's a very rich deposit, and then the zinc values are through the roof as well, and very good silver. But if we talk at Romanera, which would be the next slide perhaps, or 2 slides on, I think. Yeah, go one. Okay, so on this section, you can see it's a very tabular, thick deposit. It's only drilled to 350 meters. It's more than 20 meters thick. And you can see on that plan map, that blunt end on the east side, that's because it's open, it's still very thick at that end. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see just some of the precious metal values, which are not, when this work was done by Rio Tinto back in the 80s, they used a simple lead plus zinc cutoff. And again, in that time, base metal companies weren't that focused on the precious metal values. They kind of came out or they didn't. But there's very good gold values in this project, and actually probably higher than the 64 grams per ton silver. And then some of the holes that you see, there are no assays for gold. They're just in the calculation as 0 because they didn't assay. So that 1 gram gold, it's anyone's guess what that actually is. Certainly near surface, we're seeing zones with 3 to 5 grams type of material. So we can probably add quite a bit of tonnage to this just within the existing drilled model in our view. So that's the exciting thing. With 11 million tons of those grades in an area like this, you can almost contemplate an operation on that resource alone. But we see it getting a lot larger with the program that we're going to do. It's a very good area in terms of infrastructure. Huelva province. The closest operation to us is just across the border in Portugal, would be Neves Corvo, which is a world-class deposit that's operated and run by Lundin. About the same distance to the east, we've got Aguas Tenidas, which is a very solid operation operated by Trafigura. First Quantum is closer to Seville with their operation. Trafigura also has a major facility at the port in Huelva for concentrate shipping and blending and worldwide transport. Rio Tinto has a copper smelter in this region. Glencore, of course, has a zinc smelter in northern Spain. So we're in a very good jurisdiction to do this. And the other thing that's really changed in the last few weeks only is the whole environment here. in terms of development. About 3 weeks ago, maybe almost a month now, the junta in Andalusia, which is the governing body for this region, came out with a declaration that said underground mining in this region is of strategic importance, and it will be a favored economic activity, and development will be permitted on all land classes, including those certain of those that have environmental status. And that wasn't. It seemed a little bit out of sequence at the time, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic. But the next week, the European Union came out with an announcement that they're going to invest 3.5 billion euros in these two provinces as part of the post-COVID economic restructuring in Spain and in Europe, and have declared this region, as an important future supplier of strategic metals for the European Union. So there's going to be a lot of momentum in this area, and we don't even quite know what the implication of this 3.5 billion euros is. It's a massive amount of money. I assume some will go to the smelters, but it's not a huge area. It is the most prolific volcanogenic massive sulfide belt in terms of tonnage in the world, however. So there could be a lot to do here. In terms of deposits, there's been over 2 billion tons worth of resources found in this region historically.
So I'm going to ask a question here that we're not really supposed to ask whenever we have a sort of junior mining company on, which is, do you think that you might take this to production? Is that sort of the thought process at all with access to potential government funding, or do you think that this is more likely a project that is at a level where one of the big boys is going to want to take it over?
That's a good question, actually. My background is I spent 20 years in Miranda Falconbridge, and I was the global exploration manager for Falconbridge, and in that role I was not just responsible for exploration, but also the mine site exploration and new projects. So I always approach projects like this with the idea that we're going to build it. We're going to take the steps and do the systematic, proper work that you need to do to take it down that path. But that being said, I think something like Romanera can develop into and a property like this with 3 deposits that would be certainly close enough together to share a common mill. 3 deposits within an 8-kilometer stretch it's not that difficult, especially given the value of the ore at Infante. You could truck that almost to northern Spain, and it has that kind of value. So collectively, I think this will be a property that will be material to most of the majors that are in this sector. Certainly companies like Lundin and Trafigura, who are already in the region, make very good sense. But Nexa out of Brazil has a smelter on the coast in Brazil that's always looking for zinc concentrate. Glencore and Rio Tinto, they're still very active in the business at the last I looked. So I do think that is quite a good possibility, and ultimately that decision is the shareholders, right? It's if somebody starts a process to take over the company, then really the shareholders get to decide the outcome of that, whether they're happy with the bid or not. So that's the way I look at it at this point. We're certainly not looking to bring in a strategic too early. We think we can add a lot of value for our shareholders by building the assets up into something that's much lower risk for the market.
Okay, so we haven't talked about the Asena Coir, I think I'm pronouncing it right.
Asena Coir
project, yes. Project yet. So what can you tell us?
Well, Asena Coir is That's actually the bigger of the two. Now we don't have this one quite yet. This is the past producing Los Frailes mine, and it was shut down in the late 90s because of a tailings collapse. Subsequently, it was taken over by the government, and the site was reclaimed. And then due to lobbying by the local communities who wanted the jobs back, it was agreed by both levels, the federal and regional levels of government, and all parties unanimously to put this back out to tender. It was a complex tender process, and because of the history, you had to, you almost had to do a feasibility. And we were actually the only company bidding on this that had a drill hole database to do the work properly that was required under the tender. So we spent close to $1 million on engineering studies. So when we get this, and I do feel it's when, we are well down the road to knowing exactly how to develop this. And when I say engineering studies, they weren't high level. They were very detailed, including we did public hearings. We had the water management plan. We developed it in concert with the federal water authorities and had their approval, a letter of approval signed off on it in the bidding process, et cetera. Anyway, long story short, we felt we should have won this, and it was awarded to a local company that really didn't have a mining background. And so we felt we had no choice but to call it what it looked to be, which was a case of corruption. And so this has been through a full police investigation that went on for more than 2 years, almost 3 years. Subsequently, I think 7 people in the government and 2 principals of the other company have been charged with corruption charges. And we're right in the final throes of this process right now. It could be days to months before this is resolved, but the public tender laws in Spain are very clear, and there's a lot of precedence for them. Unfortunately, I've learned a lot about that over the last few years. But if there's the commission of a crime in awarding a public tender, which clearly there was in this case, that bid must be disqualified. And in this tender, we were the only other qualified bidder. So it ultimately has to come to us, and it must be awarded to the next qualified bidder. So the tender has been through the courts for a long time. There's no questions about that. What we see here, so the middle lens on this slide, if you're looking at the screen, is the Los Frailes deposit. It was only in production for about 1.5 years. It's a 73 million ton open pit grade deposit, kind of around 4 to 5% combined lead plus zinc with about 2.5 ounces silver. What we're really looking at, though, is there's a 20 million ton, and these are Boliden's number, who were the operator, high grade deposit that's more than 10% combined lead zinc. And this is our modeling, so we are intimately familiar with the data on this. That outcrops in the pit. So essentially you could very quickly, there's no deep shaft or no lost time here, ramp into ore from the pit and be in production very quickly. You would put in a new modern mill. Now the other deposit that you see on the right, the one that looks like it's above Los Frailes, which is the one in the middle, is the original Asena Coir deposit, which would have been mined back in the 60s. And before that in time, off and on. But that's actually a 93 million ton deposit. That's what's remaining there out of more than 100 million tons. It's more of a copper silver resource, probably a bit low grade for underground mining, but we haven't even modeled what's in there for high grade yet. But certainly it's close enough to the Los Frailes deposit that you would be able to ramp over from the same underground infrastructure and take high grade stopes out of that deposit, which is huge. And the third lens that you see, the one on the left, is actually in between the two. This is a 3D rendering, and it's a bit of an odd perspective to try to get all three so you can see them. But actually, that third deposit doesn't even have a name. It's not well drilled off. It's just those holes that you see going through it are high grade intersections that really haven't been followed up. So similar grades to what we see at Los Frailes, which is higher grade, obviously, than the original Asena Coir deposit. The 20 million tons that I refer to, that Boliden calculated, is that's a pit constrained resource because they or reserve, I guess, in their world, because that project was in production. The drilling for this reserve, this 71 million tons, it's a reserve that in those days. When we take the pit constraint off, it gets to about 28 million tons because we can extend below the pit depths. And this deposit, again, if you go to the next slide, is it's only drilled to about 300 meters below that pit, and it's still 40 meters thick. So you were asking the question about majors on the previous project, the Iberian Belt West. This one for sure can get very big very fast. We've got 2 very large deposits and potentially a third. It's wide open at shallow depths, ramp accessible. The modeling that we put together was to use the original Asena Coir pit as a tailings containment. And because they had a very poor strip ratio, you have ample room to put all the tailings you would ever contemplate taking out of this deposit in there. It would be completely secure. You've got, by going underground, the other option for tailings, which is a sensitivity on this project, is you're going to use the paste backfill system. So a significant portion of your tailings also will go back underground. And this region, particularly Neves Corvo, really kind of were early pioneers in the use of paste backfill. So there's a lot of expertise and a lot of examples of that being done. So that's where we see it, and I would say this deposit, again, it's largely known as the 70 million ton open pit with a poor strip ratio. It's not really public knowledge except to the extent that we've made it so that there's this high grade deposit here that's wide open at depth. And I think, again, we will not get to build this one. It's a property that's already got 2 open pits. It's a highly disturbed site. It's already unanimously been approved for development by the community and by both levels of government. So this is an asset that once we secure it, and it looks like we should in the coming months, all levels of appeals for this court case are essentially done. It's now down to sentencing. We should be adding just a considerable material amount of value to the company.
So I guess the question that I have that's kind of standing out is you said effectively a feasibility study is done. Now I assume you'd have to formally file a 43-101 report on that feasibility study. But where are you planning on going from there? Are you planning on starting at the beginning in a sense with drilling, or are you looking to go into development in the next 2 years after acquiring the property, or really what are you after here?
Yeah, again, it's a very systematic process to get it to feasibility, and what we have done is an engineering study. I wouldn't call it a feasibility study because it was not optimized for costs, for one thing. And when you're using it as a public tender, you actually want to show your costs to be higher, not lower, because you're investing, right? But the deposit is drilled off for an open pit, so you do have to do some drilling because we're going to go to a different cutoff grade for the underground. So just on a grade control and for the final mine plan, you will need to tighten up where the boundaries of the high grade are. At the same time, however, you have access to the ore in the pit, and you'll have access to ore from your drilling to redo the metallurgy. And we've already designed, the mill to the extent we can. That needs a new metallurgical study to finalize that design. But and that at that point, then you can start a bankable feasibility. So it's still at least a 2-year process, I think, to get to that point.
Okay. So in terms of the near-term catalysts then, or that investors can potentially look forward to, we've got the decision that's coming up on the Asena Coir, which is, will determine whether or not this asset ends up in your hands, which obviously for a tiny microcap company, I assume that the net present value of this project is massive. And then secondly, we've got some drill results coming out in a couple of weeks. Would
Correct.
that be, and are
Yes.
there any, I don't want to sound greedy here, but are there any other catalysts that we could keep an eye out for?
Well, I think those are the main ones. We will be drilling on Infanta. Well, we are starting now. Let's say 3 weeks to maybe 4 weeks by the time we get the first couple of holes split and out and assays back. We will have assays from the surface program probably this week. I've been promised. The final permit to drill on Romanera, we want to move there by kind of June timeframe, and that will be another potentially another drill coming in fact. And then we are in our mind thinking the next resolution on Asena Coir will come around that timeframe also.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that one, don't hold me to the timing because honestly, we don't control it. That's in the courts. So,
can you give us any insights on why Mr. Sprott ultimately came in? Was it did he make any sort of comments that you can share of why he was attracted to the project?
Well, he's very bullish on silver. Obviously, he's making bonds about that. Between these two projects, there's probably 400 million ounces of silver in those numbers, not silver equivalent, just silver. So there's a lot of metal value that we're talking about here. Infanta, those grades make it worth, somewhere around $1,000 a ton out of that material. So there's going to be good margins on that little deposit there. $
1,000 a ton. Wow. Which of the do you pay attention to much of the macro, or do any of these minerals particularly stand out to you as what you're most excited about?
Well, I obviously copper is very, very key, in the whole electrification story that we see going on, and infrastructure in general. Zinc is going to do very well, I believe, on two fronts. We're going to see massive infrastructure building, and that's the key. The key market for zinc is anything to do with keeping steel from corroding. So bridges, roads, buildings, cars, obviously. But it's also going to be a very important, I think, in the future of battery technology. You see a couple of companies that are now developing zinc batteries, and they're not going to be the batteries that run your Tesla. These are the industrial scale batteries that may be the solution to how you store energy from wind farms and solar farms, so that you can store your excess peak electricity for off-peak hours. That seems to be the element that's going to be the breakthrough for that. So zinc is becoming a battery metal as well. Of course, lead always has been. Let's not forget that. But, so.
Okay, well, David, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here this morning. Actually, I don't even know where you're calling from. I never asked. Where are you joining us from?
Right now, I'm in my office in the basement in Oakville, Ontario.
Oh, okay, so you're not too far from us. Well, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. And like I said, this is a story that we've been following. We've been buying shares this morning ourselves. We really like this story. It's not too often we look at some of these junior projects and say, hey, we think that this is going to be a mine. But in this case, looking at these numbers, unless the Spanish government wants to get in the way, looks like this is going to be a mine. So congratulations on all the success you've been having. And we wish you more success as we are long the stock.
Great. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
All right. Thanks,
David.
Thank you, David. That was fun, AJ.
Yeah, it was good. It's always great to get clarification, especially on Spain is not a region I'm well versed in, to say the least. Right? So
Neither am I, and it's actually it's a little hard for us to wrap our heads around like this tiny Canadian. And somebody said it in the comments, this tiny Canadian, micro cap like that was trading at like I don't know 3, 4, 5 cents in the summer, and it's hard when you're looking at a junior stock and you've seen something run this much. Is this in the middle of a leg up where there's lots of momentum, or is this just, there's going to cycle through some shareholders and it comes back down? But I think that when you look at the actual size of these projects, I mean, the net present value on these things it's got to be enormous. And like, I mean, obviously you can put any numbers you want into a spreadsheet, but I wouldn't be shocked if you had a reasonable discount rate and ended up with a net present value figure, north of $1 billion. Not that I'm not financial advice, not a buy recommendation, not a sell recommendation. But when you see something like that and you see a tiny like $40-50 million market cap company, not really sure what it's at right now. Sorry, $60 million market cap. It's had a good morning. There's reasons to think that this thing, that this momentum is well suited. And actually, let's pull up the chart on TradingView.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that situations such as this is what really starts to captivate the whole junior mining investors' mind, just in terms of you hear that there's 400 million ounces of silver believed to be in the ground on these properties. That's a lot of silver, and if they can get to a point where they're pulling it out of the ground, those are some significant numbers, right? So it's stuff like that seems to really capture the imagination.
Always happens to be in TradingView. So here we can see the chart here. If we go back and we kind of look at it, I suppose that it was trading higher there, but if we go to the last 2 years or so, we could see that. And I was saying this to David actually in the pre-interview. This to me looks like a bit of a technical breakout. We'll have to see. I mean, it's gonna have to go a little bit higher. But if you're playing the technicals, this is a bullish indication when like you've got that level that it's a new high and. It seemingly has broken through this morning, so this could be the beginning of another leg up. I'm a big believer that we're in the early stages of of a commodity super cycle, and here you've got this like how many minerals do they have in volume? Was it lead, zinc?
They've got lead, gold, zinc,
silver, and copper. 5.
Copper, yeah.
That's polymetallic. That's the term. We sunk our teeth into cannabis, so we're kind of new to all this, and this is a very, very interesting story. Okay, so let's move on. What else is going on?
Well, 1 second here. JTD actually asked a good question. In general, what percentage of portfolio do you put into a position like this, Steve? This is something that's going to be different for absolutely everyone, and there's no standard for it. Myself, I'm a huge risk taker. I think like 95% of my portfolio is in probably high risk. If I were to take it to an actual like broker, they'd probably shoot me for how risky it is. But that's the world that me and Steve live in. So we're a bit different than the average investor. And again, we don't make advice by any sense. Not a recommendation. That's just how myself and I know Steve handles his stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of if I was playing a name like this, which we have been, I'd say that I like the stock a lot more at 30 cents than I did when it was trading at 5 to 6 cents, and they weren't awarded some of these developments that they have been in Spain. It's been largely de-risked. They've got the asset. How much of my portfolio would I put in this? It depends on how bullish you are on the mining names and how concentrated you want to get, sort of where your risk tolerance lies. I'd say that on our book right now, we've probably got a couple points in it. That I haven't done the math off the top of my head, but we like it, and that's up to you based on your own risk tolerance. Okay, so let's move on then, Jay. What is going on in the news this morning that's caught your eye?
Tinley's just put out news, and I'm working on publishing our own in the background here. If you want to go to Globe Newswire.
Tinley Beverages. Okay, give me a second here. I'll pull this up here. So Tinley Beverages. What does Jeff Mazur have for us this morning?
Jeff Mazur,
PBR,
has some great news this morning. So they have done a transaction with Pabst Labs, which is, they're very specific in that it's not associated financially with Pabst Brewing. However, Pabst Labs was created effectively. I'm willing to bet it's the same shareholders based on my understanding, just for regulatory purposes, wherein it's basically the same people behind PBR as in PBR beer. This morning, Tinley announced that they will be manufacturing Not Your Father's Root Beer, which I think in 2015, going off memory here, it might say it in there. I don't actually have it up because I am working in the background while talking.
So is this, does this say that they're going to do a cannabis root beer?
Yes. So Not Your Father's Root Beer, which in 2015 was one of the top selling craft beers in the USA, is doing a cannabis version of their beverage, which is outstanding. It's outstanding for a few reasons. First, it shows that Tinley's is getting great clients. Like Pabst Brewery, you're probably not going to get a whole lot better. PBR Blue Ribbon is a massive organization. On top of that, already we're published, so I can actually focus a bit better.
Did you manage to write an article in the middle of the Emerita?
You gotta do what you gotta do, man.
Oh my
multitask
goodness. Here I thought you were falling asleep during it. It turns out that you were publishing an article.
Yes, sometimes I have to multitask. Apologies. So they are making a cannabis version of the Not Your Father's Root Beer, 10 milligram dose. It is said to be the start. Let me pull out a quote. Can you go back to the Globe Newswire? Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I knew where it was in there. I can't remember where I put it in here. Pabst Labs is also working with Tinley's to plan the launch of additional products from the Pabst Labs brand portfolio. Now, the next text, Tinley's facility is ideally equipped to produce our glass bottle products, including pasteurization and other options. And I believe Tinley actually updated their investor presentation last night, if you want to pull that up.
Okay.
And sorry, I should have had that prep for you. I got the link right here. Send
me the link, and I'll post it, baby.
Oh, you know what? That's a 404. 1 second.
Oh, geez. We've been 404'd by Jeff Mazer. 404'd us, Mazer.
Actually, it's because they got a brand new website launched today.
Really?
That would be why I got 404. This wasn't here.
Oh, look at that. The company's moving fast.
Yeah, last night they had a new investor deck up. Today they have a new website up, and boy, is it beautiful.
Well, look at that. This is the Iguana shareholders would be happy if if only Iguana could pull that off. They never stop about that website.
Oh, I know. I think it's slide 4 or 5. 4 or 5. 4. Only tunnel pasteurization and pressurized batching options in the state. These features are optimal for de-alcoholized wine, beer, and a variety of beverages. So to me, this is kind of key as to hinting towards what may be coming down the line. They have a new investor deck hinting at de-alcoholized products, and they announced something with Pabst Labs. So might actually turn into something. I mean, I'll be the first to say, I've been a strong supporter of Tinley's. I was at their facility 2 years ago when it's just an empty warehouse. And I've supported this company for a long time. They've definitely had their problems. I will be the first to admit that. Commissioning took longer than we thought, but in the time since commissioning, they've done quite a bit. I mean, now they produce Cannabis Quencher, Sips Elixir, a couple others. Beckett's is firing on all cylinders by the looks of it. They're in Costco, and in Canada, they're in some Sobeys and co-ops in Alberta. It's taken some time, longer than ideal, absolutely, but looks like they're proving it out.
Yeah, look, this is a name I've been in and out of it with a fair bit of frequency over the last 2 or 3 years. I love the thesis, high level. I love it.
I will say I love the drinks. Some people have said there's too sugary. I'll say that. That's okay. But personally, I love them.
You're with a consumer packaged good. Like if we had a panel right now with 4 people and we brought up a beer, like let's say that I randomly brought up Bud Light, I'm gonna have at least one person who's gonna rant about Bud Light. And
even Coca-Cola, you're gonna get those same 4 people. Someone's gonna go, it's too sugary, right? So my biggest piss off about Tinley is the fact that I can't buy any of these fucking drinks. I know. I want them in Canada already.
Like this, they got a beautiful bottling facility in California. They've got these products that everybody has such great things to say about who's tried them. For the most part, I mean, I've tried some of the non-cannabis infused ones. And by the way, whenever I go to a cannabis store and they have the display case at the front with a fridge where they've got some of these drinks, they're usually mostly sold out. So there is demand for cannabis beverages. It's just, this story's been a lot slower to develop, but like, my goodness, it's easily your best pure play in cannabis drinks. And quite frankly, I don't know that there's anybody I would even put close to them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, there's a couple names up here in Canada, and I mean, even Valens has stepped into drinks aside from Hexo and everyone else. But here's the honest truth. In Canada, I have not tasted a THC beverage that I would buy again. Unfortunately, I've got terrible knees because I sit at a desk all damn day. So I choke down a CBD beverage once a week. But honestly, like, you plug your nose and you just swallow because it's so gross, really. And I just want what I had 2 years ago. Like, in my mind, there's no reason that someone like Canopy should not be able to reach what a tiny microcap has done. I don't know why others up here have had such a hard time with it, but I'll tell you, once Tinley gets here, I can promise you I will genuinely be the first in line at whatever local dispensary has it to buy what I can.
I love the thesis. So what else is going on in the news this morning? What else has caught the great Canadian small cap connoisseur Jay Lutz's eyes?
This morning, Revive also had some good news. Originally, they were focused on mild to moderate COVID-19, originally they were focused on treating mild to moderate COVID-19 with their busilamine, which they're in phase 3 clinical trials for. This morning, they also announced that they are now working with the UCSF, University of California at San Francisco, to work on researching for severe instances of COVID-19 and the use of busilamine. And for that, they are actually having the research conducted by the doctor that put together the entire thesis for busilamine working in the way it would. So great news from Michael Frank over at Revive again this morning. He's been slugging it out. I know that many people think that the whole COVID story is over. I think only 31% of the U.S. is actually is vaccinated to some degree. I'm assuming that's first, not necessarily second dose.
Only.
We say only. The U.S. is...
Well, no, that's 2 vaccines, I believe, that they've hit 100 million of double vaccinations.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I want to see it get much higher, but I mean, the rest of the world is facing something entirely different from that, right?
That's fair.
Right. The U.S. is the only spot that's reducing lockdowns. I know Ontario, where you are, went into lockdown. Here, moving was a bitch this weekend, just me and my wife, because that's all we could legally do, right? Not allowed to have anyone else around. So unless I hired movers, which makes no sense, I can't have family that I know are fine. I have to hire movers, and I'm too cheap for that. So. But let's lockdowns everywhere. So, and look at India.
It's not good. Voyager Voyager Digital records over 130,000 new accounts in April. Obviously, this one caught your eye. A stock that we talk all the time that I'm pissed off I wasn't buying at 90 cents. Almost pulled the trigger and didn't. And,
yeah, sorry to cut you off there. The big story here is 130,000 new funded accounts in April is great. However, their assets under management grew from 2.4 billion in March 2021 to 3.3 in April 2021.
So this is like something that started out on the CSE. This tiny little,
it's still on the CSE.
Yeah, it's not gonna be on the CSE much longer.
No, this will just go straight to NASDAQ. It'll probably just skip TSX altogether.
Yeah, which is kind of sad because like it would be a really great Canadian tech story, but who knows? Hopefully they do just upgrade to the TSX and have a TSX and NASDAQ listing.
You know what the big problem for the TSX in Canada is? In the US, they have two big boards, the NYSE and the NASDAQ, as everyone knows. No one likes to be on the OTC markets because OTC markets have such a negative connotation in the US. Up here in Canada, I feel that our junior exchanges are a hell of a lot more respected than the OTC. So it's easier to get funding for companies when they're on the CSE or the Venture or even the NEO, right? So NEO technically gets classified as a top level.
Yeah. There was a story that did you cover it this morning about Robinhood's raising money? Not Robinhood, Wealthsimple.
Not Robinhood, Wealthsimple.
Wealthsimple.
So Wealthsimple, yes. Mr. Velasco covered it. So it's a 750 million raise. However, 250 million of that is primary, 500 million of that is secondary. So what that means for investors out there is 500 million of that 750 being raised is actually being sold by current shareholders who are taking some off the table. A lot of it was the Power Corporation or the Power Group of companies or whatever, and they reduced their shareholdings down from like 60 or 70% down to 43%, and their position's still worth 2.1 billion after investing like I think they're I think the initial investment was like 300 and some million. So
this is such an interesting thing to be watching out for. I mean, I talk about it ad nauseum, but if you're a Canadian small cap name, the NEO suddenly got really attractive because if you go on the NEO, you have access to Wealthsimple, and you don't on the CSE. TSX Venture, NEO, access to Wealthsimple, CSE not so much. And I don't know if I were the CSE, Phil Shum, if you're watching out there, I would be
calling Wealthsimple daily.
Yeah, I would be because this is if you and I were about to take a company public, not that we've done such a thing before, but if we were, I'd be kicking and screaming to be on the NEO over the CSE right now because we've got some junior people on our staff other than young Justin, who's like a 75-year-old trapped in a 19-year-old's body who says he's 21. All the young people we talk to, they all use Wealthsimple, and Warren Buffett was going off on Robinhood on the weekend. And I don't know if I have his exact comments in front of me, but I have no problem with Robinhood. Like, if I'm a retail investor and I get free trades, okay, my data is going to go to some hedge funds and they're going to front run me, but I get free trades. If you're a long-term investor, why do you give a shit over your information being sent to a hedge fund who can front run you on one day?
I could be entirely off base here, but isn't Buffett invested in something like E-Trade or someone? Which could very well be the whole reason for his comments because he's seeing his position go down. Yeah, I don't know that for sure. I'm just talking off the top of my head, I guess.
Bitcoin was getting shit on significantly over the weekend from Bill Maher did a great bit on Friday night where he effectively first guy I've actually heard who broke down really how it works.
I didn't see it, but I've seen a lot of people say he broke it down really well, and that's not something you'd expect from Bill.
Well,
really.
no, he basically said it's just really stupid, and it's just you have all these computers that are just guessing numbers on trillions of numbers, and okay, no one's ever explained how they actually mine and solve these things before, but that makes a lot of sense of how that would take more computing power. I've said it time and time again, Bitcoin feels an awful lot like a Vancouver pump and dump, where the only reason you buy it is because you think it's going to go higher, it doesn't cash flow. And then he took a quote from Warren Buffett, which was timely because Buffett made a bunch of Bitcoin comments literally the next day at the AGM for Berkshire. And he effectively said that the only reason that you buy Bitcoin is because you think that you're going to be able to find somebody who will pay a higher price, a greater fool. And if they if you buy it off them, that's now your problem, is that you have to go find a greater fool. And it's interesting hearing Buffett make these comments. And I know that a lot of people get upset about it, but you know, he's an institutional investor of like the first kind. Like this is, he has to think about things this way. For guys like us, you know, we can kind of just surf these waves and, okay, I'll throw, you know, maybe you're a little retail investor, you're going to buy, you know, $10,000 worth, or maybe you're going to buy $100,000 worth, or maybe even $500,000 worth on something with that kind of market capitalization that trades that much. It's not a big deal. But if you're an institution and you're looking at deploying billions of dollars into this, it ain't that easy to get in and get out. So I think that that's really interesting. I think that there's a million problems with Bitcoin. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, I don't necessarily love crypto. I think that for myself, anyways, I tend to think of things in the Canadian small cap world, and I'm not afraid to get exposure to anything. So if there's any good Bitcoin stories out there, like a Voyager, I'm okay with playing it. But I'm not going to do the whole pomp thing and get up and pretend that Bitcoin's going to change the world or anything, because I don't think it will.
Some comments over the weekend too that just, I can't remember offhand what they were, but I remember shaking my head. He's overrated. He's
an idiot. But what I like about him is that he does make things simple. He gets on there and he just says the really simple things. One of the worst things that a lot of young people do when they get on social media and they talk about Bitcoin is they try to act like they understand it. Like this is this really complex problem and you don't get it, but I do. Now I'm going to talk down to you for not getting it.
If I'm not mistaken, Nate just used to work, not Nate. Pomp used to work for a trading room, and he got big into crypto, and that's literally his claim to fame, was he worked in a trading room. So I don't know why he's become this face of everything, unless I'm thinking of the wrong guy, but I'm 99% certain I'm not.
And you used to work in an HVAC shop, and I used to be a math teacher. That doesn't bother me, someone's background. But I just I can't be sold on how this thing's going to keep going higher. I think that there's legitimate concerns, and the bigger concern that Bill Maher voiced is this idea that it's sucking up all this electricity. It's bad for the environment, and it doesn't really serve any purpose. So I think that we're going to see that whole environmental tale start to get told as it consumes more and more power for people to do what? Just like speculate?
No. If you ask Kathy, what is good for the environment? It's good for the environment.
We're speculating on speculation if you're buying Bitcoin, and no, seriously, that's what it is. And
absolutely.
We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I think that Bitcoin. I can't really get that far behind it, but this is kind of like a head fake for commodities, which. Inflation is here. It is real. We pumped too much liquidity into the system.
Hitting a new high, $1,500. Holy man, that hurts.
It hurts, eh?
It hurts. One other thing I want to draw some attention to is this morning, Green Thumb bought the last private operator in Virginia.
Really?
So we actually had a great article out this weekend by Timothy Dexter, and this is the only reason I knew it, is he had indicated, I'll read it directly from the article here. Virginia has issued 5 vertically integrated licenses to the state of Virginia's M&A and ID mergers, acquisitions, in the case of MedMen, involuntary divestitures, which is just funny, has been inconsistent. In my opinion, Delitzo sold at an extreme discount, as the majority of other licenses were demanding.
Which paragraph is this? I can't find this.
Keep scrolling. Keep going. Right there.
Okay.
Virginia's expedited adult use legalization will heavily increase the valuation of Dharma Pharmaceuticals, the sole remaining private operator. And this could not have been published more timely, because this morning, Green Thumb Industries announced that they have acquired Dharma Pharmaceuticals. So truly could not be more timely. However, the most interesting part is not a single dollar sign was in the article or in the news release. We have no idea what Green Thumb agreed to pay for this, and we're expecting it to be a high-ticket item.
That's the fun thing about when the market caps get really high, like in Curaleaf's case, where they can just go and buy a European cannabis company. They don't have to file a business acquisition report. So it's like, how do we know what balance sheet they purchased? And it'll probably show up in the accounting notes, but
awfully vaguely.
We don't get to see a P&L. So how do we know if they paid an appropriate amount? I mean, we saw Afria pay $300 million for a few sheds full of rat shit.
Afria no longer exists, it's Tilray as of this morning.
Oh, really? They changed the name to Tilray?
Well, technically, Tilray acquired Afria on a technical level. So the surviving entity is in the shell of Tilray.
The shell of Tilray. when the shell master becomes the shell. Oh boy. Okay, so what's going on today over at the Dive? Talk to me.
Today at the Dive, you are about to sit down with Lynn Alden in a pre-recorded Daily Dive episode. Tell me what you talk about, because I got to write the description.
So what do we talk about? We talk about the petrodollar. I have a lot of very positive things to say to Lynn about all of her success. I like her approach, where so many of these talking heads on YouTube that talk about gold and monetary policy. It's basically hyperinflation. The world's coming to an end. The U.S. dollar is near its end point. And she takes more of a reasonable perspective to things. But the bigger discussion point is this idea of how the U.S. runs these dual deficits, where they're both importing more than they're exporting, and they're also running fiscal deficits year over year over year over year over year. Yet their dollar doesn't really seem to go down. And in large part, that's because they've been able to create financial products that the rest of the world wants. So, the rest of the world wants to invest in Facebook, Google, Apple, all these other companies, and ETFs. Pretty much the world's returns those U.S. dollars back to the U.S. by investing in stocks and real estate and all that fun stuff. So we go down there, and that's part of Lynn's point is it actually, the strong U.S. dollar actually hurts the U.S. because it makes it hard for them to export. But I don't know how much I'd buy that argument, because it also means that they're able to import great products from around the world really cheap. You
can get away with that only if you're the reserve currency like the U.S. dollar is, right? I think if the U.S. ever loses reserve status, they'll be in for a world of hurt on many levels.
Yeah, because they have no manufacturing infrastructure left. I remember once my wife and we went to Chicago to watch Norm Macdonald. I'm a big Norm fan, and on the drive back we were low on gas, so I pulled into this town. Let me pull up a video here to show you what this town looks like. It's called Gary, Indiana, and it's actually the birthplace of believe it or not, Michael Jackson. And it was really interesting to me because, so let me just get this video queued up for you guys here. And this is just sort of an indication of where the world's sort of gone here with manufacturing, right? So this Gary, Indiana was once a real happening place. It's now considered one of the worst places in America. By the way, YouTube's got this real problem with ads. Like, I put up a video here. It's just like I get hit with an ad every 10 seconds. So Gary, Indiana, all these abandoned buildings, This was once a thriving place. And so my wife and I were driving back from Chicago to Toronto, almost out of gas. I pull into this town called Gary, Indiana to get gas. And I got to be honest with you, I was shitting my pants. I just like, it's not too often that you're driving around and it's like, you know, if I make one bad turn here, I just might get mugged. I felt that way. But what I also thought was really interesting was that there was all this infrastructure. This was clearly once a great community where people did stuff and, you know, they had places to go to and things to do. And now it's kind of just sort of this abandoned old manufacturing community that nobody really, lives in other than like, I mean, the guy just blew a stop sign. Like, and perhaps that's what they're trained to do in these neighborhoods because it's so dangerous. But then it gets back to that point of what you just said. What happens if the U.S. loses its reserve currency status? It's like all of this manufacturing infrastructure is deteriorated or it's gone. And it is, you bring up a good point, is that if the U.S. wants to go back into manufacturing a lot of these goods, they're going to have to go back to building this stuff from scratch. And now the one thing I think a lot about is 3D printing and what the future of manufacturing might look like. So example, we take Dollarama, who, by the way, trades at 4 times sales, which blew my mind this morning. I was looking into that. At some point, are they just going to have warehouse distribution centers where they have machines that just spit the stuff out? I don't know. But it's a good point that you bring up there, Jay. And we'll see. I mean, we're entering a really weird economic. Did he blow another stop sign? Oh, sorry. You can't even see this.
You aren't sharing it anymore. I mean, Gary, Indiana, by the looks of it, just looks to be the story of a lot of small town America, right? Like cities, look at Detroit. Now, Detroit's being revitalized, and I know that because I'm huge into real estate, which is something I never talk about on here. I know Detroit's being revitalized, and the houses that were bought for cheap are starting to go for more. But it looks like it's going to be a problem across a lot of these states, right? Like, sure, there's old manufacturing centers, but like you said, it needs to be rebuilt. It's not going to be suitable after so many years of neglect. It's all going to be bulldozed and everything else, which might be good from an investment standpoint in the sense of that's more dollars going into the economy, but it's also going to prevent a lot more dollars from coming in because it's not cheap to build infrastructure from ground up. So, I mean, I think the U.S. will really find itself in a problem in the next several years.
Mm-hmm. So we'll wrap it up here, but EMO now 45 cents. Great morning for EMO. Kudos to David and team. Really exciting asset. He pulls off what he's trying to pull off. It's going to be really exciting. Just got a message. Tinley's expected to come back online at 1:15 after they announced their big deal with Pabst Blue Ribbon. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap
Pabst
it up?
Labs, technically.
Okay.
I'll add that. Pabst Labs. Who is associated but not financially with Pabst Brewing Company, to my understanding. I think that's how it technically works out.
Do you like PBR as a beer?
I'll be honest. I don't know that I've ever actually tried PBR.
Oh, well.
When I think PBR, actually, I think of rodeo.
But look, guys, not that we talk about it on the show is financial advice. There's no buy recommendations here. There's no sell recommendations. There's no neutral recommendations. This is just fun. It's entertainment. It's informational purposes only. If you're looking for financial advice, go find somebody who's licensed. We don't have any licenses. So don't come here looking for that sort of thing. This is just fun. Those of you who have participated in the comments, I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. My man JTD says, go Jays, 14-12. Pretty good weekend. Starting to see that team heat up. I was up late Saturday night watching them go up against the Braves. And Randall Grishik hit a walk-off single in I think it was the 10th. Anyways, most of you come here. Most of you guys come here. I was actually about probably into my 10th beer when that happened. I had a few pops on Saturday. Anyways, look, guys, you can spend your last hour staring at any screen, any place in the world, but you chose to spend it with us. I sincerely appreciate that, and I hope you all join us tomorrow at noon with more small cap news. Thank you, everybody.
Everything you've done,